Welcome to the If You Build It, Will They Learn podcast, a show dedicated to modern learning and development, with your hosts, Daniel Mendonca and Scott Babcock.
It's podcast day. Welcome to the show. This is If You Build It, Will They Learn? I'm Scott Babcock. I'm here with your co-host, Daniel Mendonca. Daniel, July is quickly, unfortunately, coming to a close. It's hard to imagine that another month in summer is going by and things are wrapping up. But how are you feeling?
I'm doing well, Scott. I think these, I don't know what we're calling them these days, micro podcasts, mini podcasts, just these shorts, bite-sized content types, huh?
Yeah, there we go.
We're going 3 for 3 here this month. Hoping to get the feedback at the end of the month and see if this is something that might continue. But they've been fun. It's been nice to just banter back and forth quick and get it up and get some positive feedback from the audience.
Yeah, I'm enjoying them. It's a different style. I think we're always up for trying something new. So hopefully the feedback comes positively for us, and we'll integrate more of these in as we go. But always happy to experiment with you, Daniel, and see what we can come up with. So today we are going to continue our conversation around the idea of inclusivity, inclusiveness. And we're going to revisit a topic we have discussed in the past in terms of learning styles and some of the preferences of your learners and how you incorporate the idea of preference potentially into your content. So really excited for this conversation, as I think it touches on something we've had a good conversation on in the past, and re-bring that to the surface and keep talking about it. So without further ado, let's jump in. So as we think about inclusivity and we continue our conversation, we start talking about learning styles. We talked a little bit in the past around the idea of, are there really learning styles? Encourage you to go back and listen to that podcast on whether it's sort of fact or myth in terms of learning styles, preferences existing, or is there greater success? But I think we all generally have a preference around learning styles, and I think that's the conclusion we came to in that podcast. And I think it's important, as you are talking about the way you're going to start assembling your content library, that you have that in mind. And you think about the way people tend to interact with content. And the reality here is you're not going to necessarily think about all the different variations, as we've talked about, more either physical, mental, or geographic, or other socio factors, I guess, if you will, that are in the past with our 2 previous episodes. This one is all about thinking about how you add diversity into your content that allows people to get the information in a way they prefer. And this is going to be, and again, it may be because of something like a physical disability where you need to have certain elements in a different fashion. But a lot of times this is going to be just around, I prefer video content. I prefer audio content. I prefer something where I'm tactile and able to kind of interact or make decisions and click my mouse. And I think this isn't necessarily about reaching everyone in an individual piece of content, but providing a lot of information in multiple ways so people have choice. And we've also talked about the importance of having choice and feeling a part of the control of your learning experience. And I think this is what we want to focus on today.
Yeah, learning styles. I think we've debated whether or not they exist in the past, and learning preferences exist. And the truth of the matter is, I think most people, maybe they don't exist, but they definitely have a preference. I always talk to our customers and our clients or potential clients when we talk about content. And one of the things I always bring up is that if you have objectives on something, you should probably find a way to put together a e-learning, like a self-paced e-learning, a video, a document, and an audio piece of content for everything, all the objectives you want to get across, because then you hit all the points of your audience. You're able to influence them across multiple ways and hit on every kind of type of learner or style that you want to, which is going to increase accessibility, going to increase the uptake and the interest from users, because not everybody wants to sit through even a 5-minute self-paced e-learning. Not everybody wants to sit through a video. Not everybody wants to read a PDF or a document. So being able to offer all those other things. Obviously, budget comes into play with all of those things, which is a conversation we have, which is obviously another form of accessibility, whether you can do things. But starting in a lot of cases, similar to a lot of other things we talk about, starting at the top of like perfect world, no barriers for me as an organization. How would I deliver accessible content to all of my users without any barriers? So no price, no modalities, et cetera, is something you need to consider as you kind of build up your learning culture.
One thing, you bring up the idea of budget, and as if you're bringing this to the forefront early in your planning, right, as you start to design and you're starting to think about scripting, and you want to address different modalities up front, you can help reduce your budget, if you will, the cost potentially, by planning these things early so that your scripting can be translated into multiple different modalities. So if you do it up front, it's much easier than if you've already created content. You're like, oh crap, we need to go back and make this into a video, or oh, we got to go back and turn this into a document. If you kind of plan for that up front, you can almost be building them simultaneously and staying in more of a concurrent flow with your project that I think can help reduce some of that cost. Obviously, there's still going to be some development and production of value that has to go into it in terms of dollars, but planning for it up front means you can script for it in a way as you're doing your writing that allows for those things to exist more kind of organically, I guess, and help reduce that budget. So that'd be a good tip, is if you think you're going to want multiple pieces of content, and if you're thinking intentionally around the idea of diversifying your modalities, planning for that early probably saves you some steps down the road.
All right, so let's talk modalities really quick, Scott, and how writing for them differs. So why don't we start, let's start with self-paced e-learnings. Like, what is just some quick tips and comments around writing for self-paced e-learnings?
Yeah, I think one of the things we talk with our content writers and we focus on upfront is, I'm watching for your ears to perk up and the smile to hit your face, but it's starting with those objectives. That has to be the first part of all of this is, are you thinking intentionally about objectives? And what I mean by that, from the purpose, especially from things like accessibility or potential modalities, is, are we really keeping the content concise and on topic? So often when we work with clients or we start to write things like, ooh, but I could throw in this one extra little bit of information, or I could add this extra slide, I could add this extra piece of content or this extra piece of context. And the reality is, a lot of times it's add-on. It's superfluous stuff that doesn't need to be there, and it doesn't stay to your objectives. So I think that's one way you can really help with attention and thinking about content that I would highly recommend, is stick to your objectives for conciseness within your writing.
Awesome. I'll just hop right in and go to the next modality quick as we try to, give you some quick tips here. So let's talk video for a second. So video in its form is a method of being able to provide a lot of information in a short period of time in most cases. So you're going to be able to get more information into a video. You want to still stay in line with your objectives, but you can get more across typically in a 2-minute video than you can in a 2-minute e-learning. That's just the reality of the situation, because listening doesn't take as long as reading. So, and you can also go back and do it again in quick order. So being able to still stay true to your objectives, but you can expand out a little bit and get some additional tips and information in there while also making it visually appealing. Now, when you're creating video for accessibility and learning styles, make sure you hit on as much as you can. So what that means is, obviously you need to have audio, but we talked about in terms of design, closed captioning is important. Is there ability to have closed captioning in multiple languages, even if you don't do the voiceover in multiple languages? All of those things are things you need to consider to make sure the message gets across and the videos are clear and concise, and they want people looking for more. You can also not only do real life video or talking head style videos with people, you can also include animated characters and make things interesting from an animation perspective to engage your users.
One thing I'll just quickly add on video that I think is important is remembering, when we talk about a learning style or a learning preference, it's all about the visual when it comes to video. And so making sure it's not dry, that it's not static images, that you want some motion. They're looking for demonstration, typically, is a great form for what video can do. And yes, you can get more words in, but you still have to have that, whether it's closed captioning or whether it's text on screen, something that draws your attention and that you can see what's happening. I think that's the importance of video, is that's what that learning style references. Lastly, I think we'll talk a little bit about, there's really two, and we can talk about both, but I'll talk about documents, and then maybe we can touch on the idea of like a podcast as well. But on documents, again, you're talking about a visual medium here ultimately, but you're talking about someone who prefers to read, because you're not going to have sound, you're not going to have audio, and you're not going to have motion typically in these. So this is where you kind of, I think from a learning and development standpoint, have to kind of put your marketing hat on and say, what is a visually appealing version of a document? And this is where, if you want information in large amounts but small textual information, if you will, is I love infographics for this style of delivery. You can get a very concise diagram or chart, and you can provide small pieces of context via bullets or subparagraphs that sort of live around it, but it's a very visually appealing way to digest information and take in something without a tremendous amount of text to support it. So I love the idea of infographics if you're going to go document-based approach, which also gives them a resource. So there's an advantage to documents that says they have something they can download and take away.
Yeah, documents are pretty simple and straightforward. I think infographics, Scott, like you mentioned, is phenomenal way to get things off. I think in a lot of different ways, whether it's learning, marketing, infographics are a huge point. And then I'll hop into number 4 is audio, which this is obviously a form of podcast, but similar to video in a lot of ways. Audio is a way to get a lot of information across quickly, and that can be used as reference material, but the other thing to do with audio is accessibility. Going back to kind of inclusivity and the topic of accessibility, is that audio is something that people tend to listen to when they're on the go, and they fill their spare and personal time with. So you can get people to start to learn and engage with learning content when they're driving, when they're working out, when they're going to all these places. You see all these self-help and motivational and learning style podcasts that get people interacting. Hey, I mean, you could listen to this podcast when you work out. I'm sure it would get you going. You can push some extra weight. But no, audio is a piece of content that can be accessed pretty much anytime, anywhere, and fill gaps. And that's a huge something to consider when you're creating it, because it really helps think about how much you can put into that content.
Well, I think when you talk about something like a podcast, you probably have greater flexibility too in terms of time. So often when we talk about things like e-learning or video or maybe even a document, you're looking at seat time, and seat being probably the most important part of that. And you mentioned that a podcast or an audio format doesn't require you to be stationary. You're not required to look at a screen. You're not reading. You can kind of put your visual and physical abilities in another direction while listening to something else. And so I think you probably have greater flexibility to be a little longer with your podcast or your audio format. But one thing from a writing perspective is you do have to have engagement. You have to be energized. You can't have it be a droning kind of reading of a white paper kind of an experience. That's just not going to fly. So remember that while they're still working out or driving or whatever, you want them to be listening intently to what you're talking about, and writing for that is a different kind of approach, and probably also impacts what talent you put in place. And I'd like to believe Daniel and I are super engaging. We've got you wrapped in attention every episode here. But we also have had moments where I'm sure we get going on a bit of a tangent and we lose you too. So make sure you're writing in a way that delivers that from an approach that isn't just reading paragraph after paragraph. All right, that will wrap up our conversation today. Hopefully this was, I liked this one a lot because it was very much around simple tips, simple tricks that you can use to put in to diversify your modalities, to help people have accessibility to content that they prefer. And that's really what this whole conversation was about, was thinking about the learning styles, learning preferences of your learners, and what are some simple things that you can do to address that up front and to think about it ahead of time as you go into your planning phase. So a good conversation. I really enjoyed it. We want to wrap up today the way we always do, though, with a little positivity, a little energy, a little excitement to bring to you in your world, put a little smile on your face, hopefully. Daniel, what do you got for us today?
Yeah, the Olympics start tomorrow. A year delayed, but here we are heading to Japan, and the Olympics start tomorrow. And similar to I talked about, the Euro soccer championships and Copa America, and international sports are are just exciting. But what I love about the Olympics is I take the month or the 2 weeks, to really engage in things that I don't watch at any other time of the year. So diving, swimming, gymnastics. I know, Scott, we've had some dialogue about Simone Biles and how she's defying the laws of age when it comes to gymnastics, being 24 years old and competing in gymnastics, which seems young, but the truth of the matter is it's not for her sport specifically. But yeah, I just watch so much, so many sports that excite me and are exciting. And anytime people are on the international stage for their country, there's always so much passion around it. So pretty excited. Canada, not a huge, driver of success in the Summer Olympics. We usually try to reserve that for the winter time, but I'm hoping they do well. So
I always love it because I find myself in front of the TV at 2:00 in the afternoon or something like that, and watching some sport that, one, I didn't always know it even existed, and two, definitely don't know the rules to. But by the end of the Olympics, I feel like I'm a dedicated handball fan, or that I'm super bought into the biathlon or whatever it is, right? There's always some sport that I don't know how it works, but I start to pick up the game. Water polo, a sport I've never actually watched unless it's Olympic season. So I like just the fact that there is so much talent and so much diversity. You get to watch all of it. So I'm with you. Super excited about the Olympics. For me, as our vacation up north is wrapping up, I don't know, I think we spoke on it before, but my oldest son has a life goal to visit all the major league ballparks. And I'm excited we're going to knock one more off the list. We are headed over to watch the Brewers play, and just really excited that he gets to do one more stadium and check that box, which is always kind of fun to see the highlight on his face. Plus, who doesn't love to go to a live baseball game? So really excited for that, and it'll be a nice conclusion, and then we head back and the boys start school right away. So a nice wrap up to summer for us as July kind of wraps and finishes here. So excited for that. That will do it for us today. I'm Scott Babcock. He's Daniel Mendoza, and we will talk to you next week.
have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the If You Build It, Will They Learn podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Join the conversation by emailing us at podcast@haylight.com. Find us on social media at BuildItLearnIt, and be sure to check us out on the web at www.haylight.com. That's HALIGHT.com.